All right, so I think people are trickling in still, and I think some people will still be joining in over the next minute or so. But I think we could get started and kick things off. So first, I'd just like to welcome you all to this webinar together with Supermetrics and Groupon. I will just stop sharing my screen. And all right, so I think we can kick things off. So again, firstly, welcome everyone to this performance marketing masterclass. My name is Edward and I'm from the Supermetrics marketing team. And we're excited to be joined by a very special guest today, Sam Lloyd, who is Global Media Marketing Director at Groupon. So Sam, thanks so much for joining us all today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. And we'll be hearing about Sam's journey going from working with siloed marketing data to managing full funnel performance marketing in a global e-commerce company. We're going to dive into overcoming the challenges of working with siloed data, measuring and optimizing performance marketing in e-commerce, how Groupon prepares for Q4's crazy peak season, and much more. And this webinar is going to be a relatively informal fireside chat kind of session. And if you have any questions that you would like to ask Sam, then what you can do is drop them in the Q&A. So you'll find that at the bottom of the Zoom menu, and we'll pick out a few questions to ask at the end of the session. So with that being said, Sam, I think we could get into it. And you have quite the background as you run media marketing for Groupon, a global e-commerce marketplace, obviously with over 1 million merchants and millions of active shoppers. You were former director of digital marketing at Penn Foster, former senior paid search strategist at WordStream, and have over 10 years experience in performance marketing for agencies and in-house brands. And you also started your marketing career off at Versace in New York. So it has been quite the journey. But to kick things off, what drew you to paid media and performance marketing specifically?
Yeah, so when I first started my career, I was very much in the traditional marketing space, but soon transitioned to digital marketing. It was a developing industry, so it was good timing. I think it was really what drew me was the data that was available and the ability to understand the impact of your efforts. I also love how in paid media you can bring creativity and data together. I think that's ultimately how you win. And working at a few agencies early on in my career was a great place to learn. It's often a sink or swim environment, and you get to experience multiple industries all at the same time. And you're around peers doing exactly the same thing you are. So it's a great atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was performance marketing like actually back when you started your career? As digital advertising was a relatively new thing, even some 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, my memory of last month can be foggy, but certainly CPCs were a lot cheaper. It was a much less competitive space, even in the US. I would say anecdotally, when I was starting off in digital marketing was when things were scaling in the bottom of the funnel kind of strategies. One area that I was lucky to get trained on early on was CRO, which most people didn't know what conversion rate optimization was. But optimizing your website for conversion is so important. And even now, I don't think brands always put enough emphasis on it. Remarketing was the new shiny thing with amazing conversion rates. It's probably what was a factor in why brands continue to invest heavily in bottom of the funnel strategies. And there was no formal education on digital marketing. It's only as of late that you're able to specialize in such courses. Back in the day, a lot of people were doing digital marketing were self-taught. And there was a lot of people claiming they were advanced in paid search and other channels, but it was a really broad spectrum.
Yeah, and what are then some of the biggest challenges you faced as a performance marketer throughout your career?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's certainly been a few. One would be attribution. Now, obviously, attribution for digital marketing is one of the big selling points compared to offline channels. But when your brand is on something like last click attribution, you really run the risk of overvaluing some channels like paid search and undervaluing others. And this is where I think marketers can really struggle to show the value of a full funnel strategy. People don't wake up one day and just randomly Google your brand. There's a lot that goes into that search. But when teams have this data in front of them, showing the best ROAS for these campaigns, it's really easy to want to focus and invest in those areas. And don't get me wrong, like you should be, but not all the investment should necessarily be going there. If you put all your investment in bottom of the funnel campaigns, it's really not a viable long-term strategy. And after a year or so, you're going to start to see those brand searches diminishing. How I typically have overcome this in the past is incrementality testing. In my experience, this has proven the most effective at demonstrating the value at more upper funnel campaigns. At a previous brand, the investment was historically more bottom of the funnel, and I wanted to test YouTube as part of a mid-funnel strategy. And so I had to build a business case and go to finance to unlock some dollars. And, if you're looking to test for the first time or looking to scale, your mid-funnel strategy, a couple of things I would recommend is answering the why now. Is there something coming up seasonality wise, like Black Friday, Cyber Monday? Is something going on with brand searches? And then make sure to outline what the measurement strategy is. It's really important to set it up for success, and to also communicate what that reporting cadence will look like. And another thing is just kind of as a final note would be to add what other brands are doing in that space. So once you have those dollars, then you really need to nail the creative. So make sure you've put enough time with your creative team as well as your platform partner, because this can really make or break your performance. And then in terms of the measurement strategy, so we've designed previously incrementality tests, where basically we're selecting a certain amount of DMAs to target, and then we'll identify other DMAs as the control. And being able to measure that incremental ROAS is ultimately what it is going to get it over the line to be doing long-term investment in mid-funnel. And I mean, the test that we ran with the results, we didn't switch it off after. So.
Yeah, this is super interesting. And I think on the bottom of funnel spend, that's a problem and a challenge I think everyone faces. And I think everyone listening could probably relate to that on some level. And this comes back to something we discuss a lot in the Supermetrics marketing team, and that's demand capture versus demand creation. So a lot of bottom of funnel spend is focused on capturing that demand of people who are in an active buying cycle. So can you tell us more about the incrementality tests you run, how you can convince those senior stakeholders, particularly those who aren't in marketing, maybe control the budgets, that marketing needs to be investing higher up the funnel to ensure you're creating demand, not just capturing that demand?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of what incrementality testing is, it essentially is an A/B test. Typically how I've done it in the past is for the US, it would be splitting it up in terms of DMAs. So it would be the test group is now exposed to this mid-funnel strategy, whereas your control group just has your BAU performance campaigns. And this allows you to calculate the incremental value from group B. I think it's super important to be looking at operational KPIs within those different strategies. Mid-funnel, I'm going to be looking at engagement KPIs. What's our click-through rate? What's our landing page views? But that isn't necessarily going to get through to every other stakeholder. And so that's where the long-term KPI comes in. And incrementality testing can be a great way to highlight how important that is over a 12-month period. So operational KPIs are great. Looking at CPMs, you can definitely correlate that with the ROAS. But ultimately showing what that is doing to your bottom line, it just takes a bit longer to get that. But that's ultimately what I've seen has really got it over the line and enabled us to invest in more of a full funnel strategy.
Yeah, great points. And I think good bottom of funnel ROAS also comes from good top of funnel and middle of funnel investment and execution. So I think super good points. And moving on to another challenge, I know you've had a big challenge around siloed data. So why is then having access to centralized and clean data imperative as a performance marketer?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have the most up-to-date and centralized clean data, you're essentially flying blind, and that's obviously very dangerous when you're optimizing campaigns. There's also no time for manual pools of data. Platform diversification is really important. And so as you onboard new partners, pulling data becomes more complex and time consuming. With one brand, when we acquired another company, within the first year, we were able to increase profits significantly. And how we were able to do this was through getting the most up-to-date data and then immediately acting on those insights. So data gets old really fast. And as you make changes, it's critical to be refreshing that data to see how it responds to your optimizations.
Yeah. So how do you bring that real-time data together and get that 360 view?
Yeah, so I'll add a bit of background here. About 6 years ago, when I was listening to a marketing webinar that Supermetrics was sponsoring, the speaker gave a brief introduction of the tool, and I thought, that looks cool, I'll try it out. And 6 years on, every company or client I've worked for, I've onboarded Supermetrics. So I'm typically pretty skeptical about adding tools. I really only advocate for a tool if it offers something that we don't have with our existing platforms. And with Supermetrics, what stood out to me compared to other tools is its flexibility. So with every performance team I've been on, there are account, strategy, campaign nuances. And having that flexibility in how you build the queries to pull in the data is something I just haven't found with another tool. There's always been a roadblock. So I use mainly Supermetrics Google Sheets. It allows us to manage budgets, which is split not only by channel, but also by strategy. And then it allows us to pull in the KPIs that matter for each strategy. So like I said, with mid-funnel KPIs, I'm going to be looking at engagement metrics. With bottom of the funnel, I'm going to be looking at conversion KPIs. That can all be pulled in and refreshed automatically, which is awesome for me and the team. And so given Supermetrics has been such an asset to the team, and I first heard about it from a webinar, I thought it would be nice to pay it forward, so to speak. I promise I don't have shares in Supermetrics. So,
yeah, and if we get into the data a little more, you spoke about a few KPIs you look at different stages of the funnel, but let's dig deeper into full funnel performance marketing at Groupon. And what are then the goals and the KPIs you look at each stage of the funnel?
Yeah, so for awareness, I'm going to be looking at, but again, more of the operational KPIs. It would be the impressions, video views, CPMs, for mid-funnel, the click-through rate, landing page views. And then when we get into the bottom of the funnel, it is going to be the CPA, ROAS, average order value, conversion rate. They are like pretty different across those three strategies, and that's why I think it's so important to be setting up the campaign for success and establishing what the KPIs are and what the goals are before you launch. There's also brand lift studies, which we run. You definitely don't want to be running those too frequently. If you're changing out creative or the audience targeting, then absolutely, it would be great to run brand lift studies within the platform.
Yeah, and are there any specific channels that you found work better for different stages of the funnel?
Yeah, I mean, I think it ultimately depends on the brand, and you should be testing across the board. For instance, YouTube, I think there is opportunity to be driving more than just awareness and consideration, but that I would say that is predominantly more of the focus there. Pinterest, again, is something that I've seen more from an awareness than a driver of conversion. But I think ultimately, because every brand is different, you've got to be testing and seeing what works for you.
Yeah, and we'll come on to that in a little more detail later on. But how do you then manage your global performance marketing? What kind of workflows do you have at Groupon just to stay on top of everything?
Yeah, so we are a global team at Groupon, and I have team members across the US and Europe. So it's really important we have effective workflows. I'm also a big fan of automation, and I personally always want to be doing things as efficiently as possible. I've always said to my teams, 90% of your day should be focused on driving performance in some way. If it's not, why are you doing it? So you need to make sure you are keeping everyone in the loop, and have really clear goals and an owner at each stage. If you're a manager, make sure you're providing your team with the context of the bigger picture. I think it really helps drive performance in their channel, but also allows them to stay connected to the brand. And, from a project management, I've tried most tools. And Trello, Asana, I like them all, whatever works for the team.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And as you said at the top of the webinar, performance marketing requires a great balance of both creativity and analytics. So let's move on to the former. So what's your approach to creating and landing a really effective ad creative?
Yeah, so I think it's marrying the brand messaging with performance tactics. So the two teams should not be siloed. If you only focus on one of these, it is typically not going to be as effective. I also think it's really important to be making small and frequent changes to just small tweaks to the creative. I've often found more significant impact in performance through small changes like button color or headline copy. Make sure you're including sense of urgency. Time and time again, that has been proven to be most effective. And then always keep in mind, you have to grab the audience in the first 2 to 3 seconds. And you need to be upfront with your brand. Your logo should be there clearly throughout. And I'd highly recommend running A/B testing, and then sharing those insights across the stakeholders. At a past brand, we were testing headline copy on Facebook and Instagram, and found it worked great on Facebook, but not on Instagram. I would never have been able to guess that. And so you really have to be doing ongoing A/B testing, and then making sure you're sharing those, particularly with the creative team, so that every asset delivery has got those tweaks in place. And so that ultimately you're just building and getting better.
Yeah, and then in recent years, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, they've all come along. So how do you go about trying, testing, and experimenting on new performance channels?
Yeah, so I would say try to do a light level of effort testing to begin with. You don't want to put a ton of engineering and product work into a platform only to find that the platform doesn't really perform for your brand. Like I said, every brand is different, so you really do have to test to find out. It's also important to be testing platforms across a full funnel strategy. One platform may work better for a particular strategy. I was saying earlier about Pinterest, like if you were just to test that with a bottom of the funnel strategy, it may not work that well. But yet you've actually missed opportunity of driving awareness on that platform, sorry. And I think understanding how every platform has nuances, what works on one won't necessarily work on another. Speaking of creative, what you use for TikTok, more informal creative, less polished, won't necessarily work for Facebook and vice versa. So if you can utilize the platform partners as well, you do have aligned goals there. And they're going to really have the insights of what works for their particular platform.
Yeah, and then for e-commerce marketers in particular, Q4 is an insanely busy time. We have things like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and obviously the holidays, and it's often referred to as peak. So how do you and your teams prepare for Q4's wild peak season?
Yeah, I mean, I actually love Black Friday and Cyber Monday as a marketer. The last Q4 was my first peak with Groupon. And I found there was a real buzz among the team, even being remote. There's obviously a lot of prep that goes into it across the teams. Reporting is a big one. Making sure you have full visibility, even at the hourly level, is really valuable. Making sure you're starting early with campaigns, like it isn't just about that 2-week period. And then making sure there's clear workflows if any issues arise, that needs to be outlined well before peak. And make sure the team has clear goals, obviously not just for peak, but if you have clear targets as a performance team, you will hit them. You just need to make sure the team know exactly what they need to do. I think as you are going through peak, it's important not to get siloed in your channel. If you're managing a team, make sure you're communicating how trends and performance look beyond just your specific channels. We're obviously in a new world following the pandemic. You can't just rely on historical trends when building your strategy. Last year, more people were shopping in store versus online because of shipping concerns. Whereas the previous year, a lot of markets had to rely on online because of lockdown and restrictions. So I think it's even more important to be following current trends and be as agile as possible to react in real time. One thing I do find really helpful, it's simple, but using Google Trends to understand outside factors, I think it can really help ground you. It's easy to forget and just focus on your own data, but understanding what's on the consumer's mind right now is a great way to get a pulse on the market and how that can impact your own performance. And then I guess final note would be prioritization is key, making sure the teams are focused on peak week and nothing else, making sure there are no distractions. Don't bite off more than you can chew in Q4. There shouldn't really be any new initiatives launched. It should be focusing on what works.
Yeah, that's great advice. And actually on the back of this, when are you actually going to start planning for this year's peak?
Pretty soon.
Okay.
I think the general philosophy is, the sooner the better. So.
All right, that's your next week sorted then. And
Yeah.
Any final advice before we wrap up and take some audience questions?
Yeah. I think the main point I would want to get across, particularly if you're launching or scaling a full funnel strategy, is to make sure your measurement strategy is in place, which includes incrementality testing. It does take planning, and there are drawbacks to it, as there are with every measurement strategy. You have to keep everything else constant. But I think it's a really effective way at measuring the impact of a full funnel strategy. If you working with your analytics team, it's definitely a collaboration. If you're limited in resources, you can absolutely utilize the partners. You very much have aligned goals there and wanting to scale the spend. But that design of how you're measuring success is super important. And then I think the final advice for anyone in performance would be to make sure you're celebrating the wins across your team. In performance marketing, there's always an opportunity to improve unless you have 100% conversion rates. Every month there will be new targets, new initiatives, but it's important to reflect and celebrate what worked. And I think that also breeds more wins. So there's no downside.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. And I guess with that, I could pass over to Fanu for any questions we have from the audience, and then a quick poll.
Yes, thank you, Edward. We have a lot of interesting questions here, so let's start with the most popular ones. So, Sam, what tools, websites, or resources do you use on a day-to-day as performance marketing specialists to be competitive?
What tools other than Supermetrics, obviously. So a couple of different ones. Definitely, an analytics tool, whether it's Google Analytics or Tableau. It's obviously also super important. And then depending on the channel, does it mean like platforms or just specific tools? I guess it could be a range of different things. But also use things like SEMrush. That would be another favorite. I think there's any more. There are lots out there, but I'd say in general, have a test, have a free trial of them, and see what works with the data that you have.
All right, sounds good. The next question is, how do you figure out how to prioritize branding versus performance marketing? Yeah,
well, I think, performance is typically something that is scaled, and it is finding that balance. If you're starting off trying to test more of the full funnel strategy, I think it's coming up with what a percentage looks like that should be going to brand versus performance. And then as you're testing, the stakeholders will get more comfortable with the investment that you're putting into both performance and brand.
Yeah, true. Then there's one question diving a bit deeper into the changes going on in the marketing industry. So what steps or changes have you taken in your funnel campaign strategies and objectives in response to the impact of the likes of iOS 14.5 and a greater reliance on first-party data?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, the iOS update that happened last year was an impact on all of us, and it does make things more challenging as marketers when it comes to tracking and attribution. Obviously, there are more changes coming. As more changes roll out, I think it's really important to be looking now at how that's going to impact you, come next year, and testing out new strategies, contextual targeting being one, understanding what kind of strategy you're doing to grow your first party data is also going to be really important. And then I would say, like, the platform diversification, CPMs are going up. And so relying on one platform, it is not necessarily going to be your best strategy. So I would definitely be testing out new platforms.
Okay. And you've been talking about incrementality tests. So there's also one really good question about that. So how do you craft an incrementality test? What is the first step and what makes a good A/B test or holdout test? Who needs to be involved to create the test properly? How long should it run?
Yeah, so let me try and dissect that. So I think first understanding your campaign positioning and objectives, what are you looking to achieve with it, is obviously really important. You should be partnering with analytics, absolutely. But like I said, if you don't have those resources, definitely partnering with the platforms, their experience with running these. So that would definitely be a recommendation. I'd say you have to run it for at least a month to get enough data. But that does very much depend on the market and the level of investment that you're doing. Something else in there. I'd say as well, like definitely reach out to me after, because that's a big one. I'm always happy to take questions offline. But yeah, as far as the splitting up of the locations, one of the most important things is identifying the DMAs that you want to target. I'm saying DMAs, it's typically DMAs for the US. And then what are the similar DMAs that are the control that you're not going to target? So that is definitely an important piece that your analytics team or platform partner can really help with. But that really helps get rid of any seasonal impact that could be happening. And it's just a great way to identify that incremental lift from your group, your test group.
All right, sounds good. Maybe as the final question, we could take up this one. What is your top piece of customer content? Video, product sheet, infographic, or something else?
Well, I'd say one of the core has to be video. That is, but it does depend on the strategy. But there's so much that goes into video, and it's such an important piece of the strategy across platforms. So I think is where to invest the time, where to make sure you're getting the best creative out there. I would say it was video.
Okay. I think that was maybe all of the questions we have time to go through today. Thanks so much, Sam. Before wrapping up, we're going to launch a small poll, and you should be seeing it in a minute. So in the poll, you can let us know if you would be interested in a demo of Supermetrics. So if you want someone from our team to contact you, please let us know and we can get onto that after the webinar. All right, Edward, I will let you take it from here and wrap things up.
Cool, thanks so much, Fanu. And yeah, I just want to thank everyone again for joining, and thanks for all the great questions. Some really, really good discussion and insights. We hope you enjoyed this masterclass. And if you have any feedback, you can send it to me directly, actually, over email, edward.ford@supermetrics.com, or I'm also quite active on LinkedIn, so you can message me directly through LinkedIn as well. If you like, if you requested a demo, we'll be in touch shortly to follow up so you can see Supermetrics in action, and we'll share the recording with everyone as well over email, most likely tomorrow or then early next week at the latest. And then finally, I just want to say a big thank you to Sam for doing this masterclass with us. It was a real pleasure having you join us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
See you.
Bye.